Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome 9 webinar. We're going to give people a few minutes to join. I'm going to place you on mute, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome 9 webinar, Ruggedizing DevOps in the Cloud. My name is Ellen Blum. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Dome 9, and I'm here with Patrick Pusher, our Technical Evangelist at Dome 9, who's filling in today for Roy Feintuch. In today's webinar, Patrick is going to discuss how the Dome 9 ARC platform enables rugged DevOps by allowing programmatic testing of security and compliance posture prior to deployment. The Dome 9 API can be used to automate security testing early in the build and development process and used to maintain a closed by default security posture during deployment. Additionally, Dome 9 improves the signal-to-noise ratio by a factor of 2, where all alerts are streamlined with machine intelligence to make them more actionable, thus allowing businesses to stay competitive. We will close today with a Q&A at the end of the session. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available afterwards. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you would like to ask a question, please type it in the questions window of GoToWebinar, and Patrick will address as many questions as possible, time permitting. Without further ado, I will now pass the ball to Patrick. Let's get started.
Thank you, Tellen. Just maybe one more housekeeping note. Down in the handout section in your GoToWebinar control panel, we do have a handout there. It's entitled Dome 9 DevOps Solution Brief, and it'll cover some of the high-level material that we will also cover in the webinar, so that's kind of a takeaway resource that you may find valuable. Okay. So let me just collapse my screen a little bit here. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay, let's get started. So really, the move to paradigms like continuous integration and continuous delivery, I think really began with the rise of popularity of the agile software development methodology, right? Once we moved from big monolithic software releases, often published as box products and shipped to physical stores, to much smaller incremental software releases on a more continual basis, and we shifted to deliver this software in many cases as a service, we really required new perspectives on how we consume and control infrastructure, and then right behind that, how we manage security in this sort of new paradigm, right? And so it's those organizations then who can marry together an agile software methodology with an infrastructure that can respond at the rate of change that they require, and they will find ultimate success in their pursuit for efficiency, really. DevOps then is that intersection of software development and infrastructure operations that results, I think most often, in a unique blend of automation and integration to enable a mix of development, testing, QA, and release teams to be part of a single approach to problem solving. And we then break down the functional silos between these groups and view them as one while we integrate the output of one process to the input of another. What often gets considered last, or sometimes not at all, unfortunately, is security, right? I think when we re-architect our development process to be more agile, but we leave security out of that discussion, we wind up in a state where, we do security validation at the very end of the process, just before we deploy our solution. The challenge with this is the investment in time that the process has really already consumed, right? Wouldn't we want to know much earlier in the process, if possible, that our solution failed our internal security checks? Of course we would. It's one of Agile's main tenets is fail fast so you can course correct and get it right, rather than invest much more time in a process that will ultimately fail in the end anyways. So once again, security kind of becomes that red-headed stepchild, if you will, that's viewed as something an organization must do, rather than considering security, or maybe more precisely some new security tooling and capabilities as an enabler of capability, for example, right? We put often security kind of in the same mental bucket as our backup strategy, insurance, something we must do, rather than thinking about maybe there are some security capabilities that would extend my functionality, not something that I have to view as kind of a hindrance and this obligation I have. Hold on to that new capability thought, if you will, please. We'll get back to that as we progress this morning. Okay, so in comparison to that traditional and siloed approach, really we see that rugged DevOps scenarios integrate security into each step of the software development lifecycle by leveraging automation and integration between technologies. We need automated methods to understand, the if, when, how changes to our environment deviate from our desired state. From a people perspective, though, we also integrate security staff, engineering, and operations together for a unified and always current perspective on our infra needs and our security visibility and enforcement. So, Dome9 is a SaaS-delivered security orchestration platform that can be used both interactively but also pragmatically and in a heavily automated fashion via the Dome9 API. Dome9 is no different in this regard than AWS or any cloud provider itself. Anything you can really do at the interactive console, you can accomplish via API with Dome9, right? And the platform is purpose-built this way to fit the needs of those migrating from a traditional data center environment where automation might be modest and they will heavily lean on the AWS console, all the way to those already heavily invested in the AWS API in the way of automating their infrastructure needs, and they need tooling to fit into an already well-established workflow or process. Dome9's really been purpose-built to fit the needs of both of those use cases. The Dome9 Arc family stands for assess, remediate, and control. Really the three pillars of functionality within the platform. We have tools and perspectives to dive deep into either live cloud networking scenarios or so too as infrastructure as a code, really to assess security posture kind of in the design phase, and we'll talk about that in more depth shortly. Once understood, Dome9 has the capability inline to fix problems identified by this new visibility without leaving the tool, and the ability to enforce the correct configuration going forward, right? To regularly assess your overall security posture compared to any desired baseline, even a very customized one. So today, in this webinar, we're going to speak about just a few of the Dome9 capabilities that really speak to the heavily automated management of your security posture. But there really are many related features within Dome9 Arc, from an IAM security to policy reports, where each Dome9 feature plays a part in increasing your level of visibility into the detail you need to make informed security decisions. So think of the capabilities we'll speak of shortly as part of a larger family that delivers the visibility and control required to scale your security alongside the rest of your cloud efforts. That's probably the best way to put it. But just before we go and we dive in deep at some individual capabilities of the Arc platform, let's close on what a rugged DevOps scenario a rugged DevOps scenario might look like. What we're going to aim to do is validate our security and compliance posture early in the process. Earlier the better. We do this in two ways. One, with Dome9 Clarity, where we can evaluate in a Visio diagram-like fashion where traffic can, and perhaps even more importantly, cannot flow within a given cloud network. The second way is by involving Dome9 via API to compliance test our efforts early. And don't let that C word, compliance of course, throw you off. This is not just for external data security standards. This is for whatever is important to you and your organization. No more full-time open network security ports to accommodate the software development process any longer. Using Dome9, I'll show you how to keep your closed by default security posture intact, but still enable the push of software through that software development lifecycle, kind of in an on-demand fashion. If you're tired of alerts from so-called sort of automation software that don't make sense for your organization, maybe they have too many assumptions or just too generic, we'll show you how to focus in exactly on what's important to you, and really only that, via Dome9's compliance and governance feature set. Okay, with that said, let's dig in. So the first thing I want to show you is Dome9's premier network security visibility tool called Clarity. And it's really, really good at automating the discovery of security groups and ultimately data that has some risk of exposure to the outside. Maybe you know about that risk and it's planned, but maybe not. And Clarity makes the the visibility into those kinds of scenarios very, very straightforward. And it does so either against live environments or against CloudFormation templates. And that's a really big differentiator. We'll talk about how when we think about perspectives like immutable infrastructure, how Dome9 being able to analyze infrastructure of code is a very big deal, and it fits into your process very nicely. So rather than maybe show you more slideware, let's actually look at this. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice as we begin to work with Clarity is that choice between looking at a live environment or a CloudFormation template. I'm going to look at a live environment right now, but know that as we upload CloudFormation templates, you get the very same visual representation that you'll see me do in a live environment. You'll also see that this feature works across all of the cloud environments that Dome9 supports. It works maybe a little bit differently in each environment, but you'll see how the main tenets of what Clarity shows you remain the same. So we're going to choose our production environment, and we're going to choose a region. Of course, if you're uploading a CloudFormation template, you won't do that. You'll upload it, and then you'll analyze exactly what I'm about to show you here. So in this case, we're looking at a region. We're looking at all the different cloud networks that that you have, and more importantly, how they relate to each other through VPC peering relationships. If at all, right? So we see here, for example, we zoom in a little bit. We have a bunch of networks kind of in this somewhat familiar hub and spoke kind of architecture. We also see our direct connects kind of graphically represented here within Clarity. If you have VPCs that do not relate to others, they'll be kind of more like islands down here, as you see with this development VPC. And if you have VPCs that belong in an AWS account that is not managed by Dome9, you will still see them here. They are represented within this account, but maybe that is an emerging sort of shadow IT situation. That's a really good way to begin to ask questions about what these networks do if you see them sort of net new and they're a surprise to you. But let's dig into a specific VPC. We're going to choose this main demo VPC, and we're going to choose our security group view. Now, this is the view that you'll most often probably leverage through uploading that CloudFormation template. And this view is all of your security groups arranged in an exposure to the outside way. So the swim lanes you see with DMZ, partially open, effectively internal, and internal zone, these are Dome9 classifications based on the detail in the rule sets of your security groups. So for example, my load balancer security group is here. If I click it, I'll get some detail in the right-hand detail pane. My load balancer security group is here because it's got one or more really permissive rules that let in broad traffic from the outside. In this case, that's against this TCP port 443 sort of secure web. This is not necessarily a problem. You can envision that it's sort of a load balancer's job in a lot of situations to bring in broad traffic and classify it and send it kind of deeper within your network based on what it is. So having a load balancer there isn't a surprise to me necessarily. Yet having my default security group there is, I know it's there because it has one or more super permissive rules to the outside. So if I click it, right away I can tell it's SSH that's the offender. And worse than that, this little number 1 in the top right of my security group tells me there's actually a resource assigned to this as well. So I've broken a couple of best practices. I've populated my default security group with content first off, which I really maybe shouldn't do. But worse than that, I'm actually using this. I've assigned a resource to it. If I click on it, I can see that it's my database instance. It's DB1. So that's the idea. Without clicking a thing, I can tell I've got a major architectural issue in my network. I've got my default security group out there with permissive rules and resources assigned to it. And I didn't have to click Clarity to even, at all to understand it. When I do, though, when I begin interacting with Clarity, like clicking on my load balancer security group, or maybe let's choose one a little deeper in, I can see both in graphical format and sort of in the detail pane on the right-hand side where all the permitted traffic is allowed to flow in and flow out of. So now if we are either troubleshooting in a live environment, but then preparing maybe to fix this problem in our CloudFormation template, I could either look at my live environment that's been provisioned by a CloudFormation template, but maybe that's drifted a little bit in configuration since then. If your environment's completely locked down, maybe not, but going back to the source, kind of where you trust that provisioning to happen, is definitely the best policy. So uploading that CloudFormation template to Dome 9 and evaluating in this fashion will allow you to, before you even think about provisioning the first time, will allow you to get your security architecture right. No longer are we designing this with the text editor trying to conceptualize what we're doing in our head. We're doing that, but then we're bringing it back to Dome 9 and we're iterating with that CFT upload until we are confident that we have the security controls around our infrastructure that will provision with that template designed as as we see fit. So that upload to Clarity is a very popular function for those customers that practice immutable infrastructure sort of paradigms. The second view of Clarity, which is really interesting too, is the effective view, right? Because it's not only the security group architecture that we need to get right. If I bring a new resource into this VPC and I assign it to the wrong combination of security groups, and in fact that's what's going on here in this default scenario, right? We can't see it in this view. We can see we have a default security group, we have some other security groups, and we have DB servers. But if we switch over to effective policy, we're going to make this multi-assignment problem just drop dead easy to see. Because what we do now is we're not looking at distinct security groups, we're looking at groups of common policy. For example, this group here in the middle of my Clarity illustration says that I have two resources, namely Web Server 1 and Web Server 2, that are assigned to a combination of two different security groups, namely Common SG and web servers. And that multi-assignment, that combination of two different security groups, results in this effective policy, right? This is the policy due to the combination of those two security groups that these two instances will follow. And that's helpful, but what's even more helpful is now to look in the DMZ, we don't just have our load balancer and our default security group anymore, we have something assigned to DB servers. And that's because our one resource, that DB1 that we knew was assigned to default, since we saw that in the last view of Clarity, is also assigned to DB servers. So what may have happened is somebody came in to make a change and erroneously assigned that DB server, who should only be in DB servers, also to the default security group. That's something we can find in the previous view, but only if you know what you're looking for, right? If you're kind of doing a generalized review and you come into the effective policy view here, seeing that becomes very evident. So it's these two perspectives, either looking at a live environment or, again, that infrastructure as code perspective through analyzing a CloudFormation template, that you'll be able to leverage with Dome 9 Clarity. Okay, so we looked at Clarity. There's much more to Clarity, but certainly in the confines of about a 45-minute webinar. That's the introduction. We would love for you to experience more of it. We'll talk about that at the end of the webinar as well. Moving on to something a little bit newer in the platform. Clarity's been in the platform for a good 3 to 4 years. The compliance engine is something that we debuted last year, and it has to do with measuring your environment and really all of the infrastructure you manage with Dome 9 against any kind of sort of model or golden standard, whether that standard is based in sort of external data security standard. Maybe you have PCI DSS to maybe you're mandated to follow that due to some credit card sort of processing. We have that kind of standard, as you see on the screen, within the platform, as a few more, plus the ability for you to craft your own. And that's probably the biggest thing that that we want to share today. It's a newer capability. We launched this last month, and it's around crafting your own measurements that are important to your organization, or even augmenting those external data security standards with some tests that are very, very specific for your organization internally. Yeah, so let's have a look at what this looks like here as well. So we'll navigate over to the compliance engine, and as promised, here sort of are the off-the-shelf standards that you can pick from, both kind of more externally recognized versus some best practice tests that we work with our infrastructure as a service partners to develop. So, formal, less formal, and then, as mentioned, the ability to craft your own, or maybe a mix, right? Take some of the rules you like from the PCI report, or sorry, the PCI rule bundle, and augment with some very, very specific things of your own. So let's have a look at what this looks like. Let's take the PCI rule bundle. The 75 in parentheses here are the fact that we have 75 measurements in this bundle. And to the right, we can sort of scroll through them. If you're familiar with Dome 9, our traditional perspective has really been fundamental infrastructure as a service security. Concepts like security groups, VPCs, or virtual networks, network ACLs, those types of things. The perspective in the compliance engine is much wider than that. It is, it's across, as you can see in the validation types here, it's across, key rotation with KMS, S3 bucket storage permissions, RDS usage, IAM policies, yes, network port exposure scenarios, those haven't gone away. It's just that what you can test has been greatly sort of expanded in terms of the scope. And you'll notice that as you work through looking at the measurements in each of these bundles. We're testing things like password policy, use of the root account, enabled logging enabled in all regions, S3 bucket permissions, all sorts of things. So let's take this rule bundle and let's run this. Before I do, I want to flick this little show GSL switch. GSL is an acronym for Governance Specification Language, and it's a language that Dome 9 has built, that we've built all of these compliance bundles on top of. And by flipping this GSL switch, we can kind of see the meat and potatoes, if you will, of what these rules entail. A couple important things about GSL. One is that it is not a developer-focused language. It is as close to natural English as we can make, kind of a powerful, structured language. But the intent is that you don't have to write 100 lines of code to measure anything. Most of these measurements are 4 or 5 or 6 words long. You can get rather sophisticated in sort of joining conditionals with ands or ors, or even in the sort of conditionals you're searching for within the rules. They can get big, but the heart of how you put a rule together is very straightforward. Even for new users, I'll show you very shortly that we've got a guided process. If you don't know the language well, we've got a guided process for you to build these rules sort of iteratively and visually. So let's run this assessment before we get ahead of ourselves here, and then we'll talk a little bit about the language, the rules, and how you do this on your own. And then we'll talk about sort of the automated use of this capability within your your usage of AWS, Azure, or GCP. Okay, so in this case, and I promised that I'd show you this, you can run this report against one account or all accounts, and that's really important. The largest Dome 9 customers bring hundreds of cloud accounts to their single Dome 9 account, and they're looking for ways to simplify the security management across them all. So being able to run kind of one execution of a very customized report across your whole environment is really powerful. Today we'll do this across our prod demo environment. We can get we can go the other direction. We can get a little more focus in what we're looking at as well, but we're gonna run this across the whole account. And the resulting report is really intended to serve two different audiences. It's intended to serve, that compliance officer and management perspective who want to know how we did at a high level, what our pass-fail ratio is, where we failed, how we failed, as the report kind of renders here on the screen. You can see that our pass-fail ratio isn't that great. Kind of got a 1 to 4 kind of pass-fail ratio here. And even worse, our failures are on high severity kinds of tests. Most of our failures are across security groups. Second most are across instances, and so on. So we have some high-level data, even an interactive map where we can say, okay, in my sole region, I actually did quite a bit better than my global average, right? Perhaps that should be my model standard. But then kind of below the fold on the screen, you've got kind of the second audience that this report's intended for, and that's the practitioner who will be charged, or the team that'll be charged to go and fix these problems, right? So we've got each measurement. Here's a traditional kind of network security one that we'll all understand. Make sure that no security groups allow broad kind of any SSH traffic. We know we have some offenders. We just looked at a case in Clarity where this was the case, but we have more. We actually have 12 non-complies or failures across this rule. And if we hit expand, we can view the specific failures. Not only that, these are hot links to be able to open these security groups up in Dome 9. So far we've seen Clarity. We talked about it as kind of this one-way tool to understand, but Dome 9 is much more than that. It's also an action tool. We use that ARC acronym: assess, remediate, and control. And the remediate and the control really come in with being able to affect change within the Dome 9 tool. You do not have to go back to the Azure or Google or AWS consoles to make these changes. So, I found that I've got broad SSH in all these security groups. I can click a security group, open up a dedicated tab for it, and make some changes. So again, there is a path from finding the issues to resolution. There's also a path to keeping something fixed, right? When if you noticed on our security group, we have this notion of tamper protection, where I can say for any given security group that any incoming changes other than those changes you make through Dome 9 should be rejected and should be reverted back to the configuration you built here. So, for example, in my web service, if somebody tried to add an additional scope, but they did so not through Dome 9, maybe through the AWS console, or maybe that change happened through the first run of a new automation script. Whatever that change happened to be, if this security group's in full protection mode, we'll revert that change back to the configuration you built here in Dome 9 actively. So, Dome 9 is more than information-only kind of read-only tool. It can very much be used to, be your partner in enforcing this policy going forward. So back on the compliance side, we talk about what the report looks like. It's purpose-built for two different audiences, and it gives you kind of the jumping-off point to go and fix the problems that it finds. Let's take a step back then and talk about how you do more than leverage off-the-shelf policies. Certainly, that is your quickest time to to compliance if you are seeking compliance against those external data security standards. But if you're looking to either augment those, or if you're looking for something a little different, perhaps something that's different or important to your organization internally, maybe you want to run a report or a test that demonstrates to your stakeholders internally that security is a main tenet in everything you do, within your organization or within your BU. A lot of leverage of this capability for that as well. So, and a lot of leverage of this capability in automated scenarios as well. Before we get there, let's talk about how we craft rules that are important to us. I think I've begun doing that here just with 3 examples. Here's an example, and let's talk about it. This is an example that's very, very simple, yet you will not find in any generalized data security standard because it's very, very targeted. This rule says any instance out there should be based on one of 3 sort of pre-approved AMIs, and this test will test for that. Very simple. Anyone can write, but certainly understand or read a rule. Rather than some solutions where you need a developer skill set to code this, and quite often it winds up being 100 lines of code to do something like this. That's really a lot of the motivation in building this governance specification language, to give even policy creators the ability to build policy themselves. End policy, not abstract policy that somebody then has to go and translate into something actionable, but for them to be able to do this kind of themselves, bypassing that kind of Chinese whisper or telephone game communication problem that we know exists as we pass on a statement or a concept to somebody. That gets changed a little bit the further we translate that from person to person. So if we can put the power of policymakers being able to craft these rules themselves, we think that there's a lot of value in that. Insofar too as just being able to understand this while you're looking at it. So that's it. And as easy as it is, if you don't know the syntax of the language, if you're new, you can click in here, and instead of writing the rule out, we call rule build it, and we will give you kind of the starting off points to the entities that we measure within the various platforms we support, and then you can build rules net new from there. If we depart from our last example of instances being based on AMIs, something else we can do, for example, is my IAM policy really should have as an attribute that account-wide MFA is turned on. Right? Not individual accounts. I can test that as well, but right now I'm testing, as a policy, do I have MFA enabled across my account? I don't. I know in my demo account here I do have users with MFA turned on, but as a policy across my account, I do not have it enabled. And it's really that easy, right? Even if you don't know the language, the rule builder will guide you through that process. Okay, so now we talk about the ability to test off the shelf bundles of policy, kind of your quickest time to compliance if that's your goal, either for formal external data security standards or less formal sort of best practice driven guidelines, or for you to build your own rules. And maybe we'll do one more example of that as well. Here's a rule that is a little more involved, but still very, very readable. Here's one that involves measuring NAT calls. So here's one that says a subnet I have out there in AWS that is tagged a specific way, in this case designating that it's part of prod, should really have a network ACL policy where inbound traffic is only private, right? No public traffic at all. That's the kind of rule you can build in seconds with the Dome 9 compliance engine and GSL. Okay. So giving you a feel for the kinds of things we measure, how you do custom measurement. The other side of this is how you kick off an assessment, right? We've talked about, and I've shown you how you can do this interactively. You can also trigger an assessment via API, and this is important because what we're finding our customers doing now is, yeah, some will use regular scheduling. They'll trigger this at a regular interval just to make sure that they're aware of any deviations away from their desired state. Others, so that's more of on a time basis. Others will do this conditionally. So they'll have automation built that maybe is about to go and affect a major change. They will sort of trip a compliance assessment using the Dome 9 API before that. Let's call it a maintenance window. That's probably not exactly the right term, but before that big change happens. And then sort of post-change, they'll do another one. Because then, then they get a feel for, okay, has that change inadvertently, changed something that we're not aware of? The compliance support, of course, if your measurements are tight enough and accurate enough towards your environment, will catch that. So, time-based, conditionally based on what maybe other automation is doing. Lots and lots of flexibility here for how you measure this. And very soon too, the compliance engine will be able to, like Clarity does, assess non-live environments, environments that are represented more as infrastructure as code. So probably not a surprise given what we talked about with Clarity, but just know that that capability is coming soon to the Dome 9 compliance engine as well. Okay, then let's get back to our presentation. And let's talk about, this is our last feature we'll talk about in depth today, and then we'll wrap up, and as Tellen alluded to earlier, hopefully we have time for some questions. But this one is a little bit different. This stands out in the Dome 9 platform as being the only feature really intended for use by the end user. We talked about Clarity as intended for end use by the security practitioner or the compliance officer and manager. Same too with the compliance and software-defined governance side of Dome 9. This is a little bit different. Of course, administrators and practitioners will set up this capability, but then end users will consume it. And it's really all about typically if we have a sensitive service, or really any service that is not intended for the general public, we will, in our security group definition, we will build a scope of IPs that are allowed to access that service, or maybe some individual IPs that we know from, partner networks or inside our network or from trusted places. While that is certainly an approach we've used in the past, it does open up, especially if you're using sort of spectrums of IPs for access, it does open up more access than we'd like, right? It allows more access into potentially privileged services, depending on sort of what we're configuring and what we're guarding, than ideally we'd like to do. If we have one or two parties, and we have to open up a scope of of several IP addresses, then we're opening up that service really wider than we'd like to do. What we'd rather see you do is bring that to DOM 9 dynamic access leasing, and sort of control it in a just-in-time fashion. And there are interactive use cases where you will send people to dynamic access leasing, and they will manipulate the state of a port. But there's also sort of automated, more integrated scenarios we can envision, and I'll share some of those with you as we progress through the discussion of this feature that other customers have done, where you sort of use this technology non-interactively and drive it through API in an automated fashion. So let's look at this, and maybe this will become a little more straightforward. So dynamic access leasing, again, is taking a service that we don't intend for consumption via the general public. In this case, we have some web services. In other cases, we use examples like RDP or SSH. They're very, very great candidates for what I'm about to show you. But when we put them under the control of dynamic access leasing, what we're doing is we're reducing that attack surface down to absolutely nothing. Right? If I'm somebody with malicious intent and I'm port scanning your network, I will get no result back at all, because we are completely closing off any kind of port definition around these services, whether it's an individual IP or a scope, and we're shutting it off effectively. But then, as an employee of this organization who needs to consume this service, I'll come to dynamic access leasing, and I will click this Get Access button. Excuse me. When I do, I'll acquire what we call a lease on this service. DOM 9 was smart enough to figure out where I'm coming from an IP address perspective, and it knew that I belong to a class of user that has 1 hour of access on the service. So at 10:37 a.m. my local time, I will cease to have access on the service. I've got it now. I've clicked that Get Access button. I've got now what we call a lease on the service for 1 hour for my IP address only, and away I go. So now I can access the service, use it, and in an hour, that firewall exception, because really under the covers that's what we're doing. We're managing the life cycle of a firewall acceptance such that you can keep it closed by default, and really open it only in a on-demand, just-in-time fashion. And more importantly, never forget, as we always did right back in the data center days when we handled exceptions in the manual way, never forget to come back and plug that hole. Right? At the end of the year in our security audits, we would always find firewalls with exceptions that were mishandled, and this is a way to handle them very pragmatically through DOM 9. So that's all about the sort of the interactive use case. But like everything else with DOM 9 that I've shown you, you can drive this capability by API, and in the CI/CD sort of paradigm where we're integrating the development and the release of code in a single pipeline that involves multiple groups. One of the common things we'll do is we'll use we'll use Jenkins on AWS, for example, to provide those CI capabilities, maybe with a plugin, even some delivery capabilities. We don't need to leave ports open full time for these pipelines anymore. Right? These automated processes that publish software somewhere typically public for our users to download, or even internally for internal IT users to consume. There has to be the network path for that push to happen. And traditionally, we've let that network path kind of be open full time, and in some cases, regrettably, in a more permissive way than it truly needs to be due to convenience or maybe even misunderstanding of security controls. Whatever the reason, we get into the state where we have this full-time kind of open path for these release and development paradigms, whereby we don't have to do that anymore. We can keep all that closed, very secure, and really open it on demand when we need it, and only when we need it, right? And close it when we're done. And that's the idea behind dynamic access leasing. All of this can be consumed via API. So absolutely, no need to envision, a user coming and opening this. Your processes via scripted automation can do this as well. We've got that a lot of those kind of Jenkins examples. We have examples where organizations have built bridges to their help desk ticketing system, right? ServiceNow, for example, where requests come in and automatically sort of access paths to the resourcing questions get built through dynamic access leasing. So, CI/CD paradigms, support paradigms, really just know that this can be very much controlled non-interactively as well. Okay, so my goal today has really been to illustrate for you some of the emerging trends insofar as infrastructure and security management and how DOM9 really tackles these challenges, right? We've built the solution to be as equally appropriate for the organization just beginning to migrate from the data center in maybe a lift and shift sort of fashion, all the way to supporting the fast consuming and scaling flagship customers you see at every AWS, Azure, or now Google Cloud Platform event, like the one that's happening now in San Francisco with Google Next, right? Both of those use cases. For those who follow immutable infrastructure paradigms where problems may be triaged in production but are always fixed in code, right? Think the discussion we had around CloudFormation templates. We talked how DOM9 Clarity supports the upload of those CFTs in an effort to analyze them from a security perspective very early in the process, long before you would ever provision, the first time. And in general, the DOM9 API provides really all the opportunities you need to integrate anything with DOM9, but also to control DOM9 non-interactively, right? Kicking off a compliance assessment via API as part of an automated routine or operation, for example, provides a real point-in-time snapshot of your security posture. And DOM9 customers are doing all sorts of really great things with the compliance engine. We talked about regular assessments, conditional assessments based on scripted conditions, assessments in response to network security events, even automated remediation. We didn't get into that, but there are hooks in the compliance engine to then, if you find an instance out of compliance, to do something like quarantine it, or to change its networking from public to private. So there are lots and lots of opportunities to not only find but react in an automated fashion as well. So with that, I think that's it. Thank you very much for the past 45 minutes-ish of your collective time. Talon and I really do appreciate it, and I hope you found value in our discussion. And I think, Talon, we have a couple minutes left where we have some time for questions.
Perfect. It looks like we have a few questions. The first one is, we like the concept of tamper protection, but are unsure how that fits into the automated scenario. Wouldn't our scripted changes that change security groups be reverted by this feature?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute. The answer to that one is very much in line with what we were just talking about. So the state of tamper protection, you're right. If you turn tamper protection on and you push changes via any other means other than DOM9, DOM9 will actively revert those. That's what tamper protection is all about. We didn't cover a lot in this webinar. We did mention it, and it sounds like this person's more familiar with it than we covered in the webinar. What it really means is that if we discover something, if DOM9 discovers something that changed outside of DOM9, we'll actively revert it. So the question is absolutely correct. How we get around that, though, is controlling DOM9 and more accurately the state of tamper protection via API. So in this case, what I have on the screen is a bit of a script library we have developed. It's written in Python. It's meant either to be inspiration of how to use the APIs in this way to lock and unlock security groups, or to be used part and parcel the way it is. It's quite flexible. We have a lot of customers that use it the way it is, but others that have taken it and kind of rolled their own. So this is a way, again, you've got existing automation. At the start of that, call DOM9, relax tamper protection in whatever scope you need, push those changes, and at the end, insert another call to stand it back up. It's that easy. It'll fit into your workflow that easy, and there's lots of subtleties and scopes. Maybe you just want to relax the scope of tamper protection on a couple of security groups. Maybe you want to do it VPC wide. This script and example of leveraging the API will help you towards that a great deal.
Great. Okay, we have a few more. The next one, within the compliance engine, how many standards do you publish and how often are they updated?
That's a good one. So the compliance engine debuted September of last year, and so we've started with a handful of standards, including PCI, the Center for Internet Security AWS sort of foundation benchmarks, and we're rolling out checks for HIPAA high tech as well. This won't be the end. We are working on some NIST standards as well. Yeah, we will continue to evolve. When we first came out with PCI, it had 40 measurements. Now it's almost double that. As the standards evolve, but so too as we add entity support, right? As we measure on Azure, for example, more than just, or on Google Cloud Platform, more than just load balancers and instances and security groups. As one functionality develops there, and as two API coverage develops there, we will add more and more entity support, and therefore more and more rules into these bundles as well. So as they develop as standards, and as we develop with our infrastructure as a service partners, you'll see them grow in both number and in contents that already exist.
Great. And we have one final question. Does Clarity work the same across all IaaS providers supported by Dome 9?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I alluded to the fact that it does with some subtle differences, and that's probably easy to envision given that, the models of how you control security groups, or let's say even just firewalls, because within Google Cloud Platform, we don't have a concept of a security group. We have a concept of a firewall rule and a tag that's used to apply it. So all the conventions vary a little bit within the respective platforms, yet it's Dome 9 and Clarity's goal to give you this, unified single perspective across all these platforms. So let me share with you how that works. We did take a look at the AWS side. So we have kind of a VPC representation, then we also have a representation kind of deep inside that looks at security groups, and then more of an effective view that looks at security group membership and how that affects your security group posture. If we go and we look at an Azure Clarity representation, for example, you get that effective view out of the gate. That's the view that Clarity gives you within Azure. So our view won't be security groups. It'll be end resources, in this case, end virtual machines. But the classification, the swim lanes, the ability to explore in depth with the right-hand detail pane is all the same. So very, very similar. Think of this as kind of your dedicated effective view, right? When we look at a workload here, in this case it's an OpenSwan VM, we are, and if you've got more than one network security group kind of policy applied to this, we are doing the combination of those rules and giving that to you in this effective perspective already. So where we had to use the effective view in AWS because we have a competing security group view, we have one view, we have effective view that does the the culmination of these multi-memberships and gives you the effective or cumulative policy or rule definition here. So in some ways it's almost more intelligent. The one thing you lack is that security group perspective, and that's just because things are done a little bit different in Azure, and because we have different access and exposure to the API than we do at AWS. And that's the very same thing as we move over to Google as well, and we look at a network there. Very, very similar to Azure. We're looking at an effective policy. We're looking at end resources and not security groups. Certainly in Google, that's easy to understand since the concept of a security group doesn't really exist. So here it's really the end results and the same classification and ability that we have in all three other Clarity perspectives is here as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Patrick. All right, everyone. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for attending. If you have any further questions on the information presented today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via the email address q&a@dome9.com. I have a few final notes. If you've enjoyed the webinar presented today and would like to experience Dome 9 Arc platform for yourself, We are offering a 14-day free trial. Please visit our website at www.dome9.com and click on the Get Started button on our home page. Just register, and a representative from Dome 9 will contact you to activate your free trial. Additionally, if you like the webinar today and would like to hear more about the multi-public cloud security solutions Dome 9 provides, please visit the resources page on our website and sign up for several of our upcoming webinars. If there's a topic you would like us to discuss, please contact us through our website and let us know. With that, we thank you for your time today and hope you found the content informative. This now concludes the Dome 9 webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.